and the whatnots and all of that shit.
That shit.
Are we? We're live. Okay.
What happened? Okay.
We
I'm
have
gonna.
visual. We have visual.
I have a visual.
Now we will tweet. Send out the tweets from all the accounts. Retweet. Retweet. And
OWLN
retweet.
show.
And go to the Discords. Hit podcast news. As my phone keeps vibrating at everyone. Tagging all of the people.
There we go.
There we go. There we
Move
go.
you back. How do we move this? There we go. Retweet.
There you go. That's all you need to do. Retweet.
And Discord. Oh, I just moved my Discord. There it is.
Smooth.
Podcast news.
I feel weird, like, posting in places that I posted like 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
When it comes to this. But that happens.
I feel that.
Alright.
Right is right.
Alright.
RBGs. Insight. No, we don't care about them. MASH. Do you normally put one in MASH?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool.
I am good to go.
Me too.
Alright. Alright, let me make sure I got my sounders.
Ooh, give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
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 So.
Bob's still hanging out in the shed. Hey, Bob!
Hey, Bob.
Alright, you all situated then?
Oh, I'm situated.
We situated? Okay, that's a thing, I guess.
I just made it a thing.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
Alright, well, yeah, let's do a show.
Let's
and
do
then
it.
we can see if Houston can win again. This time against the Gladiators. And maybe Void will play tonight. I hope Void plays. I want to see Void and Fisher get that KDP tank duo back in action. That'd be good.
Yes.
Alright, let's do the shit. Hit in the sounder now. You are listening to Overwatch League Network, The Backcap, the podcast with insight on the Overwatch League's path to pro and contenders analysis. Here are your hosts, Emily Drunk and Ren. What is up, guys, and welcome to OWLN, the Backcap, really the podcast with insight on the Overwatch path to pro scene. I am your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight is episode 17. You know, last week we took the week off due to some traveling issues, which is fine. We did have a ton of stuff going on, so tonight we're going to discuss the latest staff changes, team changes, some tournament news, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up Contenders Season 1 as we have 4 regions that we're going to talk about tonight in, North America, Europe, Korea, the main 3, and then we're also going to take our first look at China as well. So a ton of stuff to go over tonight, which I'm hyped about. So this is going to be maybe a little bit longer of an episode than what we are used to having on the Backcap, but you know what? we don't care. We're here. Here to talk about the Tier 2 scene, and we gotta talk about the major regions. So, with that being said, guys, of course, I gotta thank everyone who is hanging out with us here tonight in our Twitch chat. Hopefully you guys are sticking around from Heroes Never Die, which we recorded before this. So it's a double podcast night. So, twice as likely for me to lose my voice at some point during the back cap, but we'll try to get through this trek together. But want to thank everyone who's still hanging out, and of course, thank our repeat listeners. So, of course, as always, guys, I have someone here with me to break everything down. Ren, getting kind of back on track here after taking a week off. We have all the regions wrapping up Contender Season 1. A lot of great series, some pretty close ones, some maybe not so close, but I just want to know, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. I've been a little tired, just like you said, there were some traveling issues. Those were on my end, so big shout out to Totem for working with me on those and flexing our recording schedule and all that stuff. So I'm recovering from that, but other than that, I've been recovering from all of these crazy finals going on. Some of them were a while ago, so I had to do a little bit of a refresher, but I mean, a lot of them were really close and just really good to watch, so I'm excited to dig into them more.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into the news from, the past, 2 weeks, really. We're still gonna cover, we've had a ton of, roster changes recently, which we'll definitely get into here in just a minute. But let's talk about something that happened at the start of the LAN playoffs for Contenders. So, there was a little bit of controversy in regards to jerseys. In particular, Fusion University. So, Fusion University came out and they weren't able to wear their jerseys, and part of that was due to the fact that the abbreviation for Fusion University, on a jersey at least, was FU. So, the team basically had to come out, they had to wear some black t-shirts rather than their jerseys, and the members of their staff unit were pretty vocal over on Twitter, calling it, kind of hypocritical because, McCree has his BAMF, belt buckle always on display. And from what I have gathered, this is basically what happened. So Fusion, they had an original jersey design, and it was not approved. And the team came back with a newer design, and according to their coach, Kirby, they never heard back from Blizzard on the new design, so it was neither accepted or rejected by Blizzard. And the team tried to press on as regards to, what the situation was with this, and apparently, the person that was supposed to make that decision, was on vacation, and because of it, it couldn't meet the deadline? So, I really don't know what to make of this, or why someone else couldn't make the decision if that was indeed the case, but it was just a total what face in regards to this, so it kind of sucks. Fusion University has their jerseys ready, looking to stake their claim as the best team in NA, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit, but it sucks, knowing that it just kind of, takes the design away. So, I'm curious to see, on the website, they changed their abbreviation to FUN, so they are now fun. They're no longer FU, so they had to change that, and it kind of brings the question whether or not, does that mean that they're going to have to alter their jersey design before they can begin production? Especially considering, I kind of want a giveaway for one? I don't know.
Yeah, no, when I saw that come out, when I saw them come out for the actual LAN, I was completely confused when they just came out in black shirts. I was like, didn't Totem just win a jersey? I mean, win a giveaway for one of those jerseys? I know they have jerseys, so why aren't they wearing them? And then this comes out, and I'm like, oh. I mean, that's kind of, given the background, that's kind of lame, just because, again, the hypocrisy between the BAMF thing on McCree, and also, again, I don't know why this person on vacation couldn't just have said, hey, person at the office still, you can cover for me. And normally that's a part of taking time off for vacation in most businesses. So I don't know really who dropped the ball there. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like if they're going to want to wear their jerseys at at another LAN, like they're either going to have to file some kind of petition with Blizzard or just design completely new ones. I'm sure if they already have those ones in production, I'm curious to see how yours is going to turn out. You know, what they're going to
I have
ship
no
to you,
idea.
because it might be one of the old FU ones. In which case, I would wear it
I,
proudly.
I would I would hope it's gonna be one of the older designs.
Oh yeah,
So hopefully, they're going to hear back from Blizzard on their newer design, whatever it is. But if they don't, they could always just like duct tape N after the FU, so
yeah.
they could have their other initials. So we'll keep tabs on that in future events. We do have another event coming up, but fortunately, Fusion University are not involved in that one. But kind of going hand in hand with Fusion University, we did get some pretty big news, and that is that their head coach, Arrow, actually got picked up for the Overwatch League. So the Dallas Fuel are the team that are getting Arrow, and this happened like right before the LAN playoffs for Overwatch contenders. So Arrow was not there with the team in Poland. So the contract for this includes a team option to extend through season 2 of the Overwatch League. And, obviously Arrow was part of Fusion University. The team had only dropped one set with him at the helm. That was included in like the last, I think like Pit Championship and obviously, contenders. And they would go on to become the North American Contenders champions this season without dropping the series, which we will talk about. But this is a coach that has coached FNRG FE in the past, aka the Corn Dogs, aka part of NRG, part of Fnatic, part of Gale Force Esports, hence their initials, or Fernurgaphy, if you want to call it that. There's so many ways that the casters and analysts have discussed their name. Call them whatever you are, but, that is a majority of the Houston Outlaws roster currently. He also had coached Team Solomid, who didn't really have, like, the longest stay in the Overwatch scene, but he also coached Immortals at one point, who would later go on to become, the LA Valiant. And he's basically coached 12 players that are currently competing in the Overwatch League. So if we look at the track record of Arrow, he has led teams that went undefeated in contenders. They had won Beat Invitational this past season. He also won a championship at the NGE Winter Premiere. And, Dallas came in, they opened up Stage 4 with a win over Shanghai Dragons, and they also picked up a win earlier tonight against Boston Uprising, who have been really struggling to deal with this new Brigitte meta and not being able to run full dive. So, with that being said, obviously, like, Dallas is a destination and a team that has had its huge share of struggles throughout the season, whether it was due to suspensions with XQC or OGE with account boosting. Obviously, now he's back. And, Effect is no longer competing with the team due to some mental issues that he's trying to deal with, and the team is helping him kind of get through that. So he's still we don't know what his status is. He's just not playing for them currently. So he might come back for Stage 4, he might not. Who knows on that front? But, Dallas has been off to a better start in this stage than what we have seen in the past, and it seems like right now they're just trying to figure out, okay, what pieces are going to fit into this puzzle. So it seems like right now they're basically like reworking and retooling the Dallas Fuel from the ground up. So new players are taking a different role, at least on the team. Maybe not so much position-wise, but more into like in-game comms and things like that. But I want to get your thoughts on the sign. Obviously, Arrow did huge deals with the Fusion University. How do you think he's going to fare in the Overwatch League? And in particular, how do you think Dallas is going to do going forward?
Well, I mean, like you said, he definitely had a good track record in contenders, and he's coached a lot of great players in the past. And I think that he's just going to bring that expertise with him to Overwatch League. And I mean, because of that, and because he's kind of taking, like you said, taking the Dallas Fuel roster and retooling it in the sense that people are, like you said, taking on different roles in the team, maybe, and again, like with shot calling and with engagements and stuff like that, more on a conceptual level. I think that kind of shakeup will be really good for the team because um, countless people have said over the past several stages that what Dallas Fuel lacks is an identity.
Hmm.
They're not a team that runs dive. They're not a team that runs tank heavy comps. They're just kind of this pod, whatever the word that I'm looking for is, of randomness. And hopefully he'll be able to bring some direction to the team. And I mean, they took down Boston, and I know they've been kind of struggling with the new meta and stuff. So maybe that means that Dallas will be on an upward trajectory from here. I've definitely got high hopes for them now that they've brought Arrow on board.
Yeah, and kind of looking back at the past, Dallas Fuel being built around that Envious core roster, Envious did really well in these death ball type compositions in the past, and this current meta does kind of favor that, so we could see a better look from them overall throughout this stage compared to what we have seen in the past. Because going into that match against who was it last week? Well, their second match, whoever they face after Shanghai this past week. In their past 20 games, their only wins was over Shanghai, so any win against another team is absolutely huge for the Dallas Fuel. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing whether or not the Fuel can kind of turn their season around. Obviously, like, they're out of the playoff run-in, but, they could enter Season 2. Maybe we'll see a lot of changes coming out of the roster. But, any signs of improvement are going to be a pretty big deal for Dallas throughout this stage. So I think Arrow's going to bring them a lot more success than what we have seen from Dallas. And I think we're going to see a better Dallas than what we have seen throughout this season. So definitely a team to keep an eye on. Probably not going to be stage playoffs material, but we'll be seeing more from Dallas overall. But, talking about people that we might not see, we have seen some changes in regards to a particular team, that being Detonator. So Detonator announced that they are ceasing their Overwatch division, so that will include Detonator Gold and Detonator Korea, so both of those teams are disbanding. And they had cited that the reason for this is due to the current state of the Overwatch circuit as a reason why they are dissolving it. So, obviously, we talked about the Pacific playoffs, and Detonator Korea were the team that won the Pacific Division for Contenders Pacific this year. They also had competed in Apex Challenger Season 5 this past season. And after that, they went into Open Division. They had topped the standings in Contenders Trials to qualify for Contenders this year. And they had only dropped 2 maps in the playoffs to win Contenders Pacific in Season 1. So, with that being said, this is one of those teams that did pretty well in the Pacific. They struggled a little bit, or a lot, really, in the Korean scene. But do you expect to see those players return to the Pacific Division, or is this a chance for them to kind of go back to the Korean scene, or maybe even a mixture of the two?
I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see at least a couple of them in the Korean scene, just because that is a more developed, I'm trying to say this nicely, a more developed scene than the Pacific scene, That said, I don't necessarily know if all of them will go. So I would probably say that we might see a mixture of them proliferating into both Korea and the Pacific Division.
Well, taking a look at Korea, there's some pretty interesting news, and that is that GC Busan has partnered with one of the Open Division teams, that being Intro Wave. So moving forward, they will be known as GC Busan Wave. And if you're unfamiliar with Intro Wave, I honestly haven't really seen them play, but in the past, at least in November, that's when they debuted, they were under the Team Fat Cat banner, which had mostly consisted of former NC Wolves players that had competed in Apex Challengers this past season. They later rebranded to Intro Wave after they were acquired by Intro Entertainment. So this marks Busan's re-entry into the Overwatch scene after GC Busan had finished their Royal Road by winning Apex Season 4. And that lineup would eventually get signed by the London Spitfire. And, London Spitfire was basically consisted of GC Busan as, half of the roster, and then the other half was Kondu Panthera. And, London Spitfire, they won Stage 1 of the Overwatch League. They got third in Stage 2. Stage 3, they finished in 6th place, and they're struggling a little bit. And they face Seoul Dynasty later this week, so I'm hoping Seoul can finally get a win over London. And, London's seen some changes as well. But Interwave is currently competing in Season 2 of the Open Division in Korea. And with that being said, they're going to need to make the top 4 in order to advance to Contenders Trials. But, I'm really curious to see whether or not this particular team can share the same success as that former Busan roster, just because that Busan roster really was history in the making, having gone through Challengers and then winning Apex, which at the time was the highest level of Overwatch, in their first entry overall. So definitely something to get excited about. So I'm really curious to get my first look at Intro Wave, or in this case, GC Busan Wave.
Yeah, no, me too. Like you said, I haven't really seen them play much either, but I mean, the GC Busan name carries a lot of weight, so hopefully they can live up to it. But I guess we'll see in Season 2. I can't believe it's already coming.
Yeah, it's already here. And speaking of things that are coming, we have the return of Beat Invitational Season 4. So this is going to be taking place here next week. This will take place May 28th and 29th, so that's, I think, Monday and Tuesday. So we are definitely covering this tournament next week on the back cap. So we will have 8 North American teams competing for a prize pool of $6,600. So with this, we have Envision Esports, NRG Esports, Simplicity, Grizzlies Esports, Last Night's Leftovers, Bye Week, aka Free Win, as we have dubbed them, No Clout, and then we have one of the undefeated Open Division teams, GOATs, greatest of all time, and I'm 99% sure that is Fractal Esports, who were the pro console players turned PC players that were also competing in some of these other Tier 2 tournaments. But the biggest thing is, last season's champions and, the Contenders NA champions, Fusion University, are not returning to defend their title. So that opens up the door for one of these other teams to stake their claim as one of the better NA teams. But in regards to the staffing, we have ZP and Jason Kaplan cast in the tournament, and all of the matches will be streamed live over on Beat's Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Beat Esports. So, we know the 8 teams in this, so just looking at the names, who do you think is the favorite to win Season 4 of Beat Invitational? Because I know, in my mind, there is definitely a heavy favorite, but I want to get your thoughts on it first.
My gut tells me to say Envision just straight off the bat, just because of how well they performed in the recent season of Contenders. And yeah, I'm just going to go with Envision. We have some other rogue teams that might come out and swing a little harder than expected, but I'll stick with that pick for now.
I absolutely agree with you. I think Envision are the favorites to win it. I'm curious to see how GOATs does. They might be really the dark horse in this one to take it.
Yeah.
But we do have a new roster coming for Last Night's Leftover that I want to talk about. Just because that was also part of the news this past week. So, we have some new players that have found a home on Last Night's Leftovers. So they do have some returning members from their roster that competed in Contenders. So Ajax, this guy has the worst name to pronounce. It's Enlayer, Decod, and Nex are all returning. And we have, we have a ton of players that left the team as well. So Dummy, Reach, Kevster, and a guy that has no vowels in his name. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Had all left the team. But joining them for this season, Beat the Invitation, we have Sugar Free, Dogmen, and Shrek. So Sugar Free and Dogmen had both played for Bye Week during Contender Season 1, and with No Clout beforehand. And then they also made some adjustments to their coaching staff. So they have Sephi and Legit RC, formerly of, San Francisco Shock and Selfless Gaming. They're going to be the coaches for Last Night's Leftovers. So this marks the first time that any of the players on his current roster have been coached by these two in particular. And Sephi was the head coach of the Shock before he was replaced by Krusty, who had previously head coached the Boston Uprising prior. So we got a new look roster for the leftovers. So if we're talking about wild cards, you would have to put them in the discussion for sure, just because, well, we don't know how they're going to look. But obviously, like across the
Yeah.
board, there's been a ton of fluctuation with the rosters, both NA, EU, and Korea. I mean, pretty much all of the regions, and we expected that. I mean, we're wrapping up contenders, and obviously, there are a lot of other of the Path to Pro tournaments going on that are kicking off. So a lot of teams trying to push to qualify for Contenders Trial, which will feed into Contenders. So keep an eye out on last night's leftover, and I'm looking forward to seeing Sugar Free back. Sugar Free was definitely one of the standouts for me in Contenders.
Yeah, no, it'll be exciting. And like you said, I mean, I think that roster could easily become a dark horse, like you said in the invitational, just because with all the new members and new coaching and stuff like that, we won't really know what to expect until we see it. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, guys, we had a ton of roster updates across the region. So, Ren, why don't you go ahead and let people know who has left the teams and who picked up some players? Obviously, you can see like I have minus and positives. So, obviously, the people that left the teams are minuses and pluses are additions.
Right, of course. Thanks, Totem. So we've got a whole bunch to go through. First, Moore from Mayhem Academy has left the team. Elbian from Envision Esports has left the team. Mikey A also left Mayhem Academy. ENCE? I don't know.
Yeah, that's ENCE. That was one of the Finland teams. The one that could never beat Team Giganti.
Oh yeah. Okay. So they left and were released by their Overwatch team, I guess.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yeah, they basically disbanded. So Light Another Candle, that is two teams that have, well, technically three teams because Detonator was two teams really. So three teams that
True.
had released their rosters and are into the free agent pool.
We'll see how that plays out. Heiko has left from the Copenhagen Flames, as well as Dredro. Hyunu, man, these names. Hyunu left from Meta Bellum in Korea. And Big Box left from Meta Athena in Korea. Insane left from Team Blossom. And then we have some additions. Xiaomin Su was picked up by Runaway. Amy, originally from Runaway, and Sleepy Bear from Detonator Korea went to O2 Ardiant. And MCD from Talon Esports went to Foxes. And last but not least, we already mentioned that Detonator Korea is leaving from the scene, basically.
Yeah, so really, like, out of that roster, the only one that was picked up so far was Sleepy Bear for O2 Ardian 2. Did struggle quite mightily when they went up against X6 Gaming, but they really were the Cinderella story of Contenders Korea this season. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the new look for O2 Ardian, knowing that they were able to pull off a lot of upsets this season overall. But with that being said, guys, we have 4 different regions that we need to talk about in regards to the LAN playoffs, and we had some pretty damn good matches overall. So let's go ahead and let's start with one of the bigger ones. Let's start with Contenders North America. So in the semifinals, we saw Toronto Esports defeat Envision Esports 3-1. Fusion University defeated Optic Academy 3-1, and then in the grand finals, we saw Fusion University defeat Toronto Esports 4-1. So, Ren, you were taking the lead on this one. What did you see out of that grand finals that had you excited?
I saw lots of stuff that had me excited. I mean, we had Fusion University. I mean, you guys know the score. We already told you. It's 4-1 in favor of Fusion. They were popping off, firing on all cylinders. But just, I mean, several highlights from various maps. I mean, they started out on Ilios, and Toronto was attempting to run quad tank, and it wasn't really working out too well.
No.
So we're just gonna breeze kind of over that, and then they go to Lighthouse after Ruins, and Nero's like, oh, I'm gonna whip out the McCree and see if I can put in work on him, and that didn't happen either. So not off to a great start for Toronto. Fusion took that map pretty decisively. On Hollywood, we got to see Fusion really start to pick up the pace. They full held Toronto on Toronto's attack. And there were several times when honorable mention to Alarm, I mean, throughout this whole series, really, but Alarm coming in with a 3K at one point and just like plenty of other kills left and right. And Zachary on Junkrat was a huge part of securing that full hold as well. And I'm going to take a little pause to mention that, I mean, we've hyped it up this whole season, basically, that we've finally gotten to see Alarm and Who Are You playing with the rest of the team on land together.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I remember myself saying, man, like, you know, they're already such talented players. Like, how much better can they get? And wow, just wow. So, yeah. Then we. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say. Well, I wanted to shout out Fragging Out for the host as they wrapped up their podcast. But yeah, like Who Are You has been a veteran of Overwatch and the Overwatch esports scene for quite some time, and seeing him dealing with all of those pin issues definitely, got Fusion University in the past when they were playing online off to a slower start. And he comes out on Ilios, and he basically just takes over. The dominoes began to fall as soon as he opened things up. He got like 2 kills immediately. Fusion were able to flip the point. And then, we saw the McCree play coming out of Nero to try to slow him down, and that did not work at all. He just gets dropped early.
Mm-hmm.
So, they tried to find an answer for Who Are You. Didn't really happen. And then on Hollywood, it was Zachary that was really the one doing a lot of the punishment. At one point, he kind of opened things up, getting an early pick on Cruz with a concussive mine. And then that basically just halted the momentum, and then he came in with his ult charge on the Junkrat compared to Dalton, who was also running the Junkrat, was night and day difference, because Zachary had already earned 2 rip tires before Dalton even got his first one. And then Alarm, we had like this really prolonged fight on Hollywood, and he was the one that opened up with like a 3K on the Zenyatta.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's pretty much all she wrote. I mean, Zachary was constantly, just a hassle. He would drop the support line, or you would get a ton of dash resets, and just the dive coordination early on was just too much to handle.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and whatever. Not the point. I'm going to move on. Sorry. There's so many things going on in my head just because watching them play is pretty wild. But after those first 2 maps, they went on to Horizon. And Toronto, I think it was Toronto attacking first. And they had a decent push on point A. And then when they got into point B, basically they kind of they had a bunch of ults banked, and they threw basically everything they had into their first point B push, and it did absolutely nothing for them. So then they get to their second point B push, and they're kind of out of gas in the tank. Nero had a blade starting to rust in its sheath there, and he pulls that out and just gets immediately shut down by Who Are You, coming in on the tracer with the pulse bomb. And then we also saw Zachary pulling out Mei on the point B defense, to decent effect, if that's the word I'm looking for. But I mean, coming on that attack from Toronto's perspective was just, I mean, they just kept getting stalled out basically, between what am I saying? Between the Mei and also the coordination of the supports. I mean, Elks, Bionades were just coming in really clutch there. So that definitely threw a wrench in Toronto's plans, and Fusion was able to close out that map pretty easily as well. On Junkertown, this is the one map that we did see go to Toronto, and we actually saw them come out the gate with a double sniper solo support lineup, which means they were also running the triple tank there as well with a Narisa D.Va Hog.
Yeah, the pulled pork.
Yeah, and it was Shu that had flexed onto the Widow, and he was actually doing really well. I was really impressed with that, honestly. And he was creating all kinds of space for his team, and they actually got a lot of work done on point A and point B, especially. And he kind of had Who Are You's number for a little while there, honestly. And it wasn't until basically the point C defense from Fusion when Who Are You was able to really exact his revenge
Right,
on
and
Shu.
on that too, like he was also getting Zachary's number 2 in the Widow duel.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I forgot. And actually, it was funny. They were talking about that on the desk. On that first Fusion defense, Zachary was sitting around on the Widow, and it was before the gates opened. And Zachary comes up and starts shooting the door right at their spawn, and he's like kind of taunting them a little bit. I'm like, that's not a good idea, buddy. And he definitely got the worst end of the stick from Shu. But I mean, there were just some really, especially once they got into point C, some insane blades coming out from Who Are You. I mean, he was able to really make more of that enclosed space on point C of Junkertown, just because you can't really run the Widow there as easily, especially with that underpass and all of the flanking routes. It doesn't work out as much. So having Shu on that Widowmaker is really what was working the best on this map for Toronto at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was curious because like, usually like you don't have like your supports flexing over to the Widow, but Shu by far was the best Widow player on either one of the teams. Regardless of how much time was put into it. Like he was really the one that kind of just came in and took over that particular game for for Envision Esport, or not Envision, Toronto Esports. And a lot of the times, like we got to see a ton of Genji play in NA, and that's pretty much been, for the most part, pretty standard. We don't really see as much Genji in some of the other regions. But on Junkertown, it was a really cool sleep dart and self destruct combo. So Dalton basically just got slept, and Krakalekin came in with a self destruct, caught him outright, which is great. And a lot of disruption was coming out from Huryu, who just continued to get the dash resets. But Shu by far was a hard carry for Toronto, constantly picking off Who Are You or winning the Widow duel just outright against Zachary. And at what point, Zachary tries to grapple hook to try to get the high ground after Fusion University took point A, and Shu immediately hits him in the dome and drops him, which is just fantastic. I love seeing that. But it was really like the Dragon Blades from Who Are You that allowed Fusion to really push forward. But there was some moments where there came some pretty big staggers. There was one point where Dalton got caught outright on his Tracer, and that one really hurt. Hurt Toronto overall. But Nero, tried to bring it back a little bit. He cut through Alarm, but Who Are You just answered right back, basically getting a Dragon Blade in one fight every single time. So he seemingly always had it, but Toronto did hang on to take the map overall. So really, like the Genji played on both sides looked pretty good, but it was really Who Are You getting the better of the exchanges in regards to that particular matchup.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's something that we've praised him for plenty of times is his very consistent play on Genji as well as other heroes, but his Genji always looks really good. But moving on to Oasis, this will be our final map in the series, and we started out on Gardens, and Nero's coming out with the Pharah, and Fusion definitely kind of read that beforehand. So Zachary's like, I'm going to pick up a McCree, and he puts that McCree to work right away. I mean, first 10 seconds of the match, pop, Pharah's out of the sky, pop, Mercy's out of the sky, and it looked like smooth sailing. It was really impressive, that play, but Nero's like, that's not going to work. I'm not going up against that McCree anymore. So he jumps over to a Sombra, and that allows Toronto to pretty easily retake the point and hang on to it for a little while. And then also on what was the next one that they played? City Center. Thank you. Sorry. I don't know why I'm saying thank you. Um, City Center basically saw a lot of pressure, I guess, getting put on Alarm, and the support line in general for Fusion, which I wanted to comment on just because, I mean, both of those guys on Fusion's support line are really talented, and I feel like if they had seen a little more pressure earlier on in the series, then this may have gone little differently, or at least gotten taken to further maps. Um, but I mean, of course, you have the rest of the Fusion line that is just also so good. I mean, in their DPS and their tanks that are able to create the room for their supports. But um, because of that pressure, there's a lot of pressure. I keep saying the word pressure on Alarm on City Center in Oasis, and I was really blown away by his self control because I play a lot of Zenyatta guys, and I mean, maybe not quite at that level, like maybe only like a couple thousand SR below him, but it's fine. And I have a really hard time hanging on to my Q when I'm in a sticky situation. And Alarm just is so cool and so focused. There was a point where he was getting really pressured, and Elk drops the beat, and that kind of runs through the cycle, and the sound barrier wears off, and Alarm is like, man, I really could do this and drop my transcendence, but he's just cool as a cucumber and able to hang on to that. And I think that comes in clutch because he's able to then have that trance not get forced out and use it for the next engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the plays you didn't mention, which was, I think, my favorite play, at least on Oasis, was from Cruz, who, of course, is on the Lucio, as he's known for, and he basically wall rides onto the high ground, and he boops Alarm off of the map, and I just thought that was the greatest scene.
Oh yeah,
That was uh, definitely a highlight. But really, like, something that happened throughout the series was we saw a lot more passiveness coming out from Beast Halo compared to what we've seen in the past, and that definitely brought a lot more survivability for Fusion University. So maybe that's why they were able to close this out and, not go the complete distance like we have seen time and time again, since they do tend to, always go to a game 5. Well, in this case, it would have been 7 if it had gone that far. But they didn't. But, really, like, Zachary coming out with McCree, getting the Pharmercy kill, obviously aided by a damage boost of his own and also the Discord orb, so really good team effort overall.
Oh, yeah.
But, Toronto at some points, they were winning the poke war to really bully the Fusion off the point, but it just wasn't enough. There were a lot of times where Dalton would try to challenge Zachary, but he would just get shot out of the sky. We saw it on the second point, because he just got shot out with the Deadeye. And Alarm, like, Nero would come out with the EMP, and a lot of times what would happen is Nero would go to engage with the EMP, and then Alarm would immediately hit him in the dome. So, not an easy game or series just in general for Nero. He was definitely under a ton of pressure coming out from Fusion University, and it was really the survivability of the tank line that was one of the bigger difference makers outside of, obviously the DPS popping off for Fusion University. So, Fusion end up taking the series, as we mentioned, 4-1. They are your NA champions for contenders, and they did it without dropping a game throughout the season. So, a perfect season, really, for Fusion University. So, that was awesome, but let's go ahead and shift gears and talk about Contenders Korea, where we saw X6 Gaming go up against O2 Ardian. So, O2 Ardian had knocked out some of the favorites to win the tournament. Obviously, there was a huge upset against... I'm trying to remember what team it was. Like, I should already know this. I was Element Mystic that they beat, who were by far one of the heavy favorites, because they have been one of the more dominant teams in Korea for quite some time. But X6 came in and they just 4-0'd O2 Ardian. So we opened up on Oasis. And it was BQB bringing out the Sombra for X6 Gaming. And he just opens up, kills Stellar's Tracer pretty much immediately. Violet got caught out of position by Rhea. And we see the EMP come out from BQB, and X6 just comes in, cleans everyone up, they get the team kill. And then Godsby gets dropped by the Deadeye from Climax. But he also like landed a pulse bomb as that happened too, so they basically traded evenly in that regard. So I thought that was pretty cool to see the McCree get blown up right after the fact. So feels bad, man, if you're the McCree in that situation. But we saw Stellar pressure that X6 frontline, gets the DMEC. He drops No Smites Wincing, which allows O2 to flip the point. But we saw a jump pad EMP coming out from BQB, and X6 just single-handedly took the point, they flipped it back, and O2 Argent weren't able to get the point back at that point, so they took round 1. In the next round, we saw Violet find an open frag on Godsby's McCree, which forced him off of the McCree immediately. Godsby ended up switching to the Tracer, and X6 wins the fight despite an early pick against them, so failure to capitalize on the opportunity for O2. And they end up pushing O2 Ardiant back all the way to their spawn at that point, so X6 is able to delay the next fight despite having dropped 3 players early on. So O2 flips the point, but X6 already has 82% on their capture already. But it's really the dive coming out of X6. They force the Transcendence out of Violet, and they come in with all of their ultimates on the next fight, and there's just nothing that O2 can do. They didn't have any defensive ultimates to use in that fight, so, that was just a winless battle. There was no way that they were going to come out ahead, unless, something, bizarre happens, they just, for some reason, X6 just doesn't use any ults, which wouldn't happen if they have, a full, ultimate bank.
Yeah.
But what happens is BQB ends up getting a little bit too greedy a little bit later on, and he gets punished for it, which does allow O2 to flip the point back. But, there's a prolonged fight that comes out, and BQB comes in with the EMP, and X6 just takes the first map 2-0 on Oasis. So moving on, we went to Hollywood for Game 2. And this is where, the Orisa really starts to buy time for X6. It allows them to get the Resurrect, but O2 manages to secure the first point to, move on to the Streets phase. We do see X6 getting pushed back after Ivy's Dragon Blade secures a few kills. Climax does get the better of Godsby on the Widow duel, which was pretty big, so O2 started to, gain a little bit of momentum at this point. But the follow-up with the EMP just does not come from X6, so we got to see a lot of progress coming out for O2 Argent. And we see Violet trying to stall things out with a Transcendence, regardless of, they had already lost, 2 or 3 players at the time. So that was, kind of some very questionable timing in regards to the ult usage. But X6 just holds on off the back of BQB's Somber play, which really was the highlight in this particular game. And we do see Ivy try to answer with a late Somber switch of his own. Doesn't really work out. O2 fails to secure the second point on their attack. And then looking at X6's attack, Godsby opts to run the Hanzo. And, it's worth noting, this isn't the current Hanzo. This is pre-rework Hanzo. So Scatter, Arrow, Hanzo, all of that good stuff, good times. Depending on who you ask. But it's not something we really get to see a lot on the contenders level. So it's a bit of an off-meta pick in that regard. And he comes in, he gets headshots, he drops Yakpun and Climax, so already a good start for X6. And they just breeze through the first point. They move on to the Streets phase, so Godsby moves off of the Hanzo, opts to run the Widowmaker, which is, it's meta on that point. There's always a switch going to the Widowmaker because of how important the high ground is on the Streets phase. And, there's one point where O2's starting to, fend him off. But BQB comes in and backdoors them, essentially. He doesn't quite finish off that point. But he got a ton of progress for free, so definitely pushed him back at that point. But X6 ends up dropping both of the supports. And then the cart just rolls forward and they complete the map. So they go into halftime with a 2-0 win. And it's really just the BQB show for the most part. Yes. So really no answer from O2 Argent in regards to the DPS line from X6 Gaming.
Yeah, no, you said it right there. BQB has just been a monster on the Sombra for these first two maps already. I mean, he's charging EMP so fast, and then on Hollywood, I mean, he has really good, it seems like, positional awareness and like kind of a command of the field. I mean, especially with his translocators and stuff like that. I mean, it looked like the whole time it looked like O2 Ardian was just guessing where he could be because there was no way that they could possibly know. I mean, it was just impressive to watch, and there was really, I mean, really just no stopping him, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to game 3, they move to Draw Anubis, aka Temple of Anubis. And Godsby opens things up with the Widow duel, getting the better of Climax. So O2 got to pressure the point after they got a resurrect, but Godsby brings it back, sniping Ivy before he was able to draw his Dragon Blade out. So that was a pretty big. And when he does draw the Dragon Blade, it is immediately met by a Transcendence, so feels bad, man, that stuff happens. So again, like, Godsby wins the Widow duel outright, drops Climax again, Roki brings BQB back up with the Resurrect, and X6 just gets the hold. So Temple of Anubis went really quick. X6 on the attack just swiftly really closed it out with their dive coordination. And really, O2 Ardian lost one fight, and that was pretty much all she wrote on Temple of Anubis. So pretty clean victory overall, especially execution-wise for X6 Gaming. And then we move on to Route 66 for Game 4. And O2 really starts to show some signs of life in this one. They don't really have, like, the cleanest attack, but they're at least getting a lot of progress, which they really hadn't seen on some of the other maps. But again, like, BQB is the one to really clutch things out. He's been an absolute nightmare for O2 to deal with. He picked off both of their DPS. Baby burns his Transcendence early, but despite that, X6 still ends up winning the fight, regardless of the poor usage, at least in terms of the timing for the Transcendence. So X6 basically pressure Climax on the Widowmaker. Rhea's Self-Destruct finds 2 at that point, and this is where BQB on a Tracer just starts to tear through everyone. And then you have Godsby with the Widowmaker. Comes in, he finds 3 kills, back to back to back, which is great. And it forces the Resurrect out of O2. And they try to stall the points using the Self-Destruct, but they're not able to get the Remech, which definitely hurts them. And then X6 complete the map. And with that, you know, they take the series to become the Korean champions of Season 1.
Yeah, we saw a lot of good play come out of those maps. I mean, you mentioned the Widow play on Anubis, and the back and forth there is important, or the lack of back and forth thereof, just because, I mean, Climax gets the first pick coming out, but after that it was kind of downhill for O2, and Godsby was just popping off, so that worked to his favor. And then O2, I mean, on their defense, they kind of were running a very immobile comp, which is can be typical of Anubis A, but it doesn't really work out if you have to full hold to win the map. Just because then if you start getting people picked off, then it takes forever to get back to the point, and you're going to lose it. It's just the respawn run is just too long there. So that was kind of a questionable call on their part when one tick could lose them the map. But yeah, BQB had a good showing on Tracer, like you said, on Route 66. I do have to say, Stellar definitely looks a lot more comfortable on Tracer in general, I think, than BQB, but he had some good moments for sure. Definitely not quite up to the level of his Sombra play, though. I definitely think BQB is deserving of the title of best Sombra in Korea, probably. I mean, just throwing that out there. Guy was pretty off the chain. And then Godsby, I mean, he had a great game too. Much thanks to his Pocket Mercy. So don't forget to thank your supports.
Obviously, yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and move over to Europe, where we saw British Hurricane beat last season's champions in Team Giganti. So, this was a 7-game series, as was the next, grand finals we'll talk about in China. So both went the distance, and, both were really solid. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about game one, which was on Nepal. So Ren, why don't you go ahead and take the lead on this one?
All right. Nepal started out on Shrine, and right? Shrine, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So much Overwatch. So Nepal started out on Shrine, and Hurricane opted for their classic, if you want to call it that, 3 triple DPS combo, and they were running that into Giganti's quad tank, and I was a little perplexed by this just because the triple DPS that they were running on this map was Sombra, Tracer, Genji. And the reason we were talking about earlier that you don't see a ton of Genji outside of NA, at least in part, in my opinion, that you don't see it in Europe, is as much in Europe is because Europe favors those kind of tank heavy comps, and Genji is not as effective against those. So you have 3 DPS, which is a lot of damage technically, but they're all kind of that pokey damage that have a hard time closing out kills. And I mean, Giganti was able to give them a really hard time on that map because of that. Going into Sanctum, the Hurricane also stuck with triple DPS, but this time they opted for Soldier 76 instead of the Genji, which worked out for them a little bit better. It was still not as convincing as convincing a win as they probably would have liked, but at least they got the map win off of that one. So triple DPS looking a little shaky out the gate from Hurricane, but then they come into Village and both teams go mirror match with triple tank, and Hurricane is definitely able to put their foot down there and close out that map, winning on Nepal with a more durable front line, I guess you could say. But moving into not Horizon, Numbani. I mean, let's see. What should I call Numbani? I think we're going to call it the Kib Show, I think, just because Kib killed it. There's no other way to put it.
Outside of his first Dragon Blade, he killed it.
Okay, yes, that is very true. I was rewatching that game today, and I was like, I had this note where he was killing it on Genji, and I saw that very first thing. I was like, what's that?
Yeah, because his first one got no value at all.
yeah. No, it definitely escalated from there, though. And I mean, he had strong blades on Genji, and also, how do I call it? Like smart blades too. There was one instance later on in the map where he was not necessarily looking for the biggest value kill wise for the Dragon Blade, but he knows he's forcing out a Transcendence and is able to trade out ultimates in that way. So that kind of coordination and just smart usage of his ult definitely looked good on the map. He also had some decent Pharah play too. I also wanted to comment, this guy, it was nice having them on LAN because we get their little face cams too, little fancy boxes over there. And he looks so chill when he plays. Like, I wish that I could look that calm and collected when I'm playing for thousands of dollars and bragging rights and all kinds of stuff. That happens to me on a daily basis.
You don't even look calm when none of that is on the line, and you don't feel that pressure. So,
hey, sometimes life is hard, okay? But I mean, lots of good moments coming out from Kib and the Hurricane in general on this map. But what did you see that you liked?
All right, well, taking it back to Nepal, you mentioned like the triple DPS coming out of the Hurricane. That's pretty much been traditional for them. And for the most part with the DPS, it has been a lot of Sombracer for EU, not so much the Genji. But we did see quite a bit of Genji play, at least in this particular series. But, there was a lot of EMP investment coming from Half-a-Cool. And Kib invests Dragon Blade, but Giganti at that point are just too spread out, so the Dragon Blade really didn't get a lot of value in that particular instance. But, I mean, all in all, like, the EMP's positioning were honestly quite awful on both sides on Nepal. But I want to highlight Funny Astro and his aggressive play on the Lucio, because there was at one point where he just boops Nil into the pit, which was awesome. And Craggy's Zarya play was absolutely stellar on Nepal as well. At one point he like cut through 3 members of Giganti, and that allowed Hurricane to really secure the point and just hold on to it for the remainder of that one to take Nepal. Numbani was interesting. Hafakul's self-destruct looked to turn things around, but the Hurricane, just end up securing the point at that point. Reaper, strange side comes out too early, and that really cost Giganti one of the team fights. And Hurricane at that point just had a ton of momentum. They just breezed through really like the second point on Numbani, and they just finished like with almost 2.5 minutes left in the time bank, which was pretty good time bank overall. And then on their defense, something that we don't really get to see in EU a whole lot is they brought out Pharmercy on Numbani defensively, which is something that we rarely see. And Giganti, they get the better of the first exchanges. They end up getting 2 takes on that first point. And Kib tries to like bring a losing fight back with the barrage, but just gets punished for it. I mean, obviously you can't really move at that point, so he just gets shot right out of the sky, and Giganti takes that first point. And, Nil with the Dragon Blade, again, the Genji play being one of the highlights, he just takes out both of the Hurricane supports. And Giganti, turn the final corner of the map at that point, and, Hurricane essentially just hang on. So early on, Hurricane had a ton of momentum going into what would normally be a halftime. I mean, halftime's pretty much after every 2 maps with the 2-0 lead. So, Giganti, though, they answer back pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and talk about Game 3, which was on Horizon Lunar Colony.
Oh, Horizon. Totem loves this map. He'll tell you all about it.
I can't wait for the rework. Or maybe not considering like how much it favors defense on point B.
True. But yeah, Horizon's interesting. It almost always goes to a second round, so that's a good time. But I mean, we saw a new light in Giganti's eyes on this map. I mean, they were like Totem said at halftime, quote unquote, they were down 2-0, and they came out. They were defending first, and their defense looked really strong. They were really putting the Hurricane through the ringer. I think Hurricane ended up completing their attack with less than a minute left on the clock, maybe just over a minute, somewhere around there. But Giganti's able to hold them off for quite a while. And eventually, I mean, a lot of that defense came out at point B, and what eventually clinched that completion for the Hurricane was Craggy. He was running on the Zarya at the time, and they were gosh dang, I can't even talk right now, sorry. The Giganti defense was kind of doing the trickle out thing to try to get back on the point and defend before the Hurricane could fully cap it, and Craggy throws out this grab surge onto the back wall that's in between the defending spawn and the point on point B, and it locks up the Giganti's Diva on the other side of the wall so that she couldn't get back to the point, which I thought was really clever and really creative, because you only needed that half a second to stall out that Diva, and it ended up allowing them to complete the map. On Hurricane's defense, you have them actually pulling out the Mei, and it was a complete flop, especially on the first defense. It did not work at all.
Yeah, off meta pick for sure does not really work too well.
I mean, sometimes you can really see, especially on Horizon, you can get those weird picks, especially Mei, sometimes working out really well for you. This was not one of those times.
Yeah, I mean, their first wall was pretty decent, but they didn't really capitalize on it for sure.
Right. So, what they were kind of going for was that first room off to the right-hand side if you're attacking, that you try to loop through. They were trying to ice wall them into that room, basically, and they got the wall down. They got everyone trapped in that room, and they went down to try to attack, and no kills came out of it. So Giganti was basically able to regroup after that. I'm sure they were a little startled, and then they went about their business and capped both points with a pretty hefty time bank. Where was I going with that? What's going on? Sorry, technical things.
Don't mess up your show notes.
Say what?
I said don't mess up your show notes.
Oh no, they're there. Don't worry. But they had Hurricane had a lot more luck with their Mei on the second time around, just because I think they were able to pull off their play a little bit better. They talked about it on the desk a little bit, but they went for the exact same thing. They pulled out the same comp on their second defense, which already I was kind of shaking my head at, just because, I mean, what's the opposing team going to expect? But Craggy was able to throw down that ice wall in the same spot he did the first time. But what happened was they caught out Giganti's Zarya on the opposite side of that wall, and the rest of the team was trapped in the room. So then the rest of British Hurricane was able to then dive onto the Zarya, take her out, and basically just wipe the team right there. So that second time around definitely worked out a lot better for them. I did kind of just want to touch on the fact that we did see a lot of Zarya triple tank business on this map, which I really liked, just because, again, Horizon is one of those kind of off maps that you can play different comps on. And we see the Tracer players more often than not flexing onto Zarya, which brings a completely different kind of play style to a team in general. Triple tank, especially with Zarya, has a very rhythmic play style, and the tempo is a lot slower, in my opinion, just because you're kind of waiting to build up those ult combos, and then you have to coordinate with your team to pull off those ultimates. Whereas Tracer comps, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to play Tracer, so there's no specific play style that goes there, but you have that kind of rhythm in the triple tank that I definitely liked seeing. It was made the series a little more interesting, I guess. What map are we on now? Junkertown?
Junkertown is the next one.
Let's go to Junkertown. Junkertown went to Giganti, so that put them up 2-2. Not up. They were tied.
They evened out the series, yeah.
Yeah, evened out the series. Thank you. Sorry. Brains all over the place. It's good. It's a good time. But, I mean, Giganti was able to really pull this off because on their attack, they ran your dear old pirate ship that we've all come to know and love.
I mean, they also ran it on defense.
Oh, they did run it on defense.
Yeah, because Reaper came out on Bastion, which is something we don't really get to see a whole lot on the defensive end, so that definitely kind of threw them in a loop.
Yeah, and I actually want to talk about a play there, too, now that you mention it, because they pulled it out on defense first. I forgot about that, and it worked out for a hot minute, and then they got pushed back up to, like, the point A checkpoint high ground area, and then Reaper set up there behind a shield, and it was Kib, I think, on the Roadhog, and he went up into the high ground and came up straight behind that Bastion and was just like, I don't like you up here. I'm gonna put in some work. And he ended up not getting the kill right away, but definitely made Reaper on that Bastion feel very uncomfortable. And that's when things kind of started to go towards more of a comp switch for them once they got into point B more. But on attack, their pirate ship was also nuts, just because, I mean, when they brought out the Bastion, I think he was able to charge his tank form ult in less than 40 seconds is what it looked like to me, because basically the whole of the British Hurricane just dove straight onto the cart to try to dislodge the Bastion from it. And I don't know how, but Masa was able to come in with some clutch reses for that Bastion and able to keep that pirate ship going. And there were some moments, it happened 2 or 3 times where I was like, that res should not have been possible, just because it now has a cast time, and that's, I mean, how do you not get that messed up? But they were able to keep that momentum going, and didn't end up dropping their pirate ship until they got to point B, like just before point B, and ended up having to switch off of it. But they were able to definitely make it very, very effective um, up until that point, at least. And then, I mean, their final push on attack was just so back and forth, trading blows. That they were in overtime for I don't know how long. It it was just really intense to watch. So if you didn't catch it, definitely make sure you do, because I enjoyed that a lot. But Totem, what are your thoughts on these maps?
All right, well, kind of bringing it back to Horizon. Something that we did see is at one point we saw Graviton surges coming out from both sides, but then LH Cloudy invests his Earth Shatter, gets a fatty shatty as he typically does. I mean, that's pretty much what he's been known for on the Reinhardt, and that's really what turned that one around for Gigante. RCK also, ends up denying Graviton Surge from Craggy at one point. But Hurricane, like, changed up their attack path, and Craggy just beams right through Gigante. And, he just ends up keeping Gigante off the points with the Graviton Surge in that regard. And I also have to point out Crusade for a moment, because Crusade on the Zenyatta was doing pretty darn good dealing with the flankers. Neil was trying to pressure him a lot with the Genji, and Crusade was getting the better of him, so definitely have to be careful when you dive on top of Crusade, because he will absolutely punish you. But really, like, the difference maker on Horizon Lunar Colony was the time bank differential, because Gigante finished off the map with nearly 5 minutes left in the time bank, and on the other side, like, Hurricane just didn't really have that much time. I can't remember the exact time that they had on the clock, but there was like a 4-minute differential between the two, and that was pretty much all she wrote at that point. Junkertown, everyone's favorite map, because we do see a lot of pirate ship or just Bastion or double sniper. I mean, we see a lot of things on Junkertown, which is why a lot of people discredit it as not being an actual map. But Junkertown is what it is. We do get some interesting things, like seeing 8-7 map scores at times. You never know. But really, like, what's great about this is that Gigante and their Alt Academy does something that few teams can really do, and that is they invest their ultimates wisely, in the sense that a lot of times they only have to invest 1, maybe 2 ultimates to fend off their opposition, as opposed to like 2 or 3 in most cases for other teams. And Craigie and Kib are really fending off the defense just by staying alive, really, on point B. Hurricane end up getting off the payload at one point, which basically just costs them, and they fall like a few meters short from actually completing the map.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it was like nil on the Bastion early on, and the Hurricane were just unable to dislodge him. And Gigante end up earning 4 ultimates after the first fight, really. So already, like, you could see like the snowball potential coming out on Junkertown, and his Nils Tank 4 comes out. He gets dropped quickly, but Gigante, at least the rest of their team, just win that fight outright. And we see a Self-Destruct and Blade combo come out from Hurricane, which gets the Bastion down, and Gigante end up switching over to full dive at that point. RCK, comes in pretty big with the Self-Destruct, takes down both of the Hurricane supports. But it's really like Craggy's work on the tank line that starts to open up the door for the Hurricane. And we see Nil kind of getting punted around when he tries to use his Dragon Blade by fusions. But Gigante gets the better of the exchange on the points, and then basically closes out with a late Zombie coming out from Crusade. But Reaper comes in with a cleanup on the 76, and again, like, it ties up the series. So all in all, like, this is one of those series that could have gone either way, and in pretty much every map, like, it's not like it was a complete blowout on either front. Like, both teams really shined in this series, so a lot of good stuff coming out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this whole series has been really close, and that's kind of poetic, because that's the theme of EU in general, is that you really never know which way it's going to go. But we were moving on to Oasis as our map number 5, and we started out on Gardens, if I'm not mistaken, and I really thought that Giganti was going to pull this one out because they had a very strong start at the very beginning, and once they kind of lost their momentum, they were unable to pick it back up, and that theme carried itself through the rest of the map because the way it kind of started going was once the British Hurricane took control of a point, Giganti would have a very difficult time of dislodging them from the point again. There were a couple times where they were able to recap off of them, but they were normally very quick turnarounds for British Hurricane. So they definitely struggled to keep up with the Hurricane's defensive prowess after the Hurricane was taking a point. And that eventually was able to get the Hurricane the map win on Oasis. Where are we now? Hollywood? Hollywood. Yep. Hollywood's good. Hollywood is good because we actually got to see some out of role flexing from our good pal Half-a-Cool. I mean, we know Hollywood is really Widowmaker heavy on the first 2 points, really. And we got to see Half-a-Cool flex onto that Widow on attack, and I was excited to see this. The casters definitely kind of hyped it up for me a little bit, and it wasn't as impressive as I would have hoped, mostly just because he had met his match in Nil. Nil outwitted him on all flanks. So sad, but still, it's always fun to see people flexing outside of their roles. So I appreciate that. And that kind of, speaking of flexing out of those roles, it made me want to bring up the fact that kind of all 3 times that we've seen British Hurricane pull out their triple DPS comps in whatever form it may take, so far, at least in this series, it hasn't worked out super well for them. We did see it work at least slightly more effectively on Sanctum and Nepal. But again, that still wasn't a very smooth map win. So I know that this is kind of their signature thing because not a lot of other teams do it. And I've seen them do it to great effect in the past, of course. But for some reason, just on this day, it wasn't really their hottest strategy of the day.
Yeah, going back to Oasis, we basically saw the Sombracer dives coming out from both sides, and Davin was really the one that was cleaning things up, and a lot of that was off of the back end of, hacks, especially onto Craggy. So Giganti, they secured that initial capture, and they basically held on till about, over 90% on the point at that point, and it was really Astro and his aggressive Lucio play that aided Hurricane to flip in the point for that one. Giganti were unable to take it away from the Hurricane at that point. So, a really good comeback overall for the Hurricane to take round 1 on Oasis. And then, the storyline in round 2 was really Craggy on the Zarya, really just gaining 100 charge to get that initial cap on University. And we see Hurricane start to get really aggressive here. They push Giganti back to their spawn at that point. But Giganti were able to flip the point back after taking care of Kib, who was on the Junkrat on this map. And Craggy's Graviton, really opens up the door in order to get the flip. And, Fusion's Fire Strike takes down Nil's Riptire, which was huge. And Hurricane at that point had taken the series lead. Hollywood was a good start. I mean, Craggy dropped Asher pretty early on, which forced Giganti to go for an early reset as you have a phone call, and Giganti were having to disengage to get away from Kib's Riptire. And what was interesting about this Riptire was they really had no idea where it was coming from, so they pushed him almost back to the spawn at that point. But LH Cloudy with the Fat Shatter yet again basically catches everyone, which allows Giganti to take point A. And this is where RCK starts to get very aggressive on the D.Va play, which allows Giganti to push the payload, which basically brought Hurricane all the way back to their spawn. And then Cloudy's next shatter, he spun around and shattered, right? It was almost like a 360 shatter, which it looked weird, but I mean, he still landed it, so whatever. But Giganti finished off the map with like 17 seconds left on the clock. And we saw Bakken on the next, on the attack, invest the Transcendence, and he gets dove on as soon as it ends, so feels bad moment there. Gigante survived Kib's, like, barrage on the Pharah, because Reaper had dropped his Transcendence at that point, and Gigante get pushed back into the cafe, which allows the cleanup to come through, and point A to be secured. And then this is where we saw, the Widowmaker duel going into that streets phase, and, Half-a-Cool tries to settle the score, doesn't get it, and Nil had Half-a-Cool's number, and Gigante just takes it, and they force the Game 7, which would be played on the C9est of maps in Dorado, because, Dorado is where we go to get dispirited, especially in contenders where we have seen C9s multiple times. But, thankfully, we did not actually get that. So that is already an improvement in terms of the tier 2 scene. So I was happy to see that.
Yeah, not this time, thankfully. And I was going to start off by saying, actually, I realized I caught myself on Hollywood. I was saying that Widow is a point A pick, and I was thinking of the wrong thing. So Widow point B. Hollywood, keep that in mind, folks. Don't try it on point A. It's not going to work. Anywho, this is the Widow on point A pick, and it's not working out so well for Hurricane. I mean, they tried to run the Widow again on Dorado, and I don't know. I mean, I think that the skill there is just in the favor of Gigante, just so much more than it is in Hurricane, because it wasn't looking strong for Hurricane. That said, Gigante's attack looked insanely strong until they got stalled, like right outside of point B, and it seemed like then they just kind of had lost their momentum. I mean, they're in map 7 of a final of contenders. I would be tired too. It seemed like they definitely kind of, I don't want to say lost focus, but definitely lost their momentum. That's the best way to put it. And they had a really hard time getting back on track after that point. But this whole match and this map specifically, but all of the match was insanely close. And kind of like I pointed out earlier, just in the same vein of the EU region in general, it definitely could have gone either way, honestly. We did see Hurricane winning on Dorado, which would win them the series and the title of EU Contenders Champion for Season 1. But it was very close.
Yeah, really, like, that first fight on Dorado was chaotic. Half-a-Cool ends up pushing the payload pretty much close to the Remembrance statue.
Right.
And we see Valkyries coming out from both of the sides, and Bakken was the one to really open things up when he picks off LH Cloudy's Reinhardt. So, at that point we see like several brawls occur, like kind of like around the payload, but the Hurricane end up gaining the numbers advantage to secure the first point at that particular time. And really, like, Hurricane just breezed through the second point to get an open and pick over onto Bakken. Reaper gets picked off with a pulse bomb coming out of Craggy, but Nil just brings it back to push off the Hurricane. And this is where Gigante's defense starts to hold on here, because Hurricane just failed to complete the map. So, Gigante on the attack, they get that first capture with almost 5 minutes left on the clock, so still, a good amount of time overall to finish out the map. Nil cuts down Crusade, but the Hurricane answer right back and fend off Gigante. We do see Nil have another Dragon Blade up pretty much for the next fight. His target priority on this one was really odd because he was going for Fusions, who I believe was on a Winston at the time, getting pocketed by the Mercy player. And because of that, like, the Blade just didn't see any value, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know why he just didn't go for the Mercy when the Mercy was literally right there, because trying to slash through a Winston takes way too much time, so definitely not someone you want to prioritize with the Dragon Blade. But
Mhm.
At that point, like, Giganti has like 60 seconds left to try to get that second point, and Fusions and Kib take down the Giganti support line, and Fusion just follows through, kills LH Cloudy, and Giganti just weren't able to engage in time for the overtime to kick in. But, Hurricaner kind of kept alive with the Transcendence, and they end up securing it at that point. So, all in all, a very close series. Both the Europe Grand Finals and the China Grand Finals were so damn close. So definitely check out those two, but just note, like, the Chinese stream does not have an English recast, so keep that in mind. But that being said, really close match, and it was, one of the Academy teams coming out on top. But, I have to tip my hat to Giganti, because that was a completely restructured roster after having a lot of their players picked up for the Overwatch League. So in order for them to, like, basically, like acquire a lot of talent from the former ENCE roster, which didn't always have the best results against Giganti, because Giganti was so damn good at the time. I was not expecting for them to be at this level already, so that was a huge thing for me to take note of. So Giganti's still championship caliber, regardless of maybe not having as good of a roster on paper, but really solid performance from both sides. But let's talk about the China Grand Finals, where we saw Lucky Future Zenith go up against LGD Gaming. Now, immediately, I want to take note of something. This is basically a Korean team going up against a Chinese team. Korean team being Lucky Future Zenith, Chinese team being LGD Gaming. Because I feel like that's important to note. A lot of people will probably be like, okay, then obviously we know what the result is going to be. And yes, the Korean team won, but it did go the distance, because this one also went 4-3. So we opened up this series on Oasis. LGD comes out running the straight dive on University, and Shy just opens things up, gets a pick on Eileen's Genji, but Lucky Future ends up winning the fight to gain that first capture. And Eileen early on had a very feels bad moment, like time and time again, because Urster comes out, bursts Eileen down with a concussion mine, and that secures the next fight for Lucky Future. Eileen goes to invest a Dragon Blade on the next fight, only for Urster to get the better of the exchange yet again. So, not a good start if you're a Genji player over in China. We do see the Riptire come out as we enter overtime, but it's a 100-0 round in favor of Lucky Future, so not the best start here for them. Ursa brings out the McCree, and Eileen ends up running the Sombra for LGD. Lucky Future ends up getting the first capture after a very scrappy first fight on the point there. Eileen does finally, start to show some signs of life. Eileen does take down both supports. And, we see Eileen engage with the Translocator into an EMP, so that paid huge dividends. And off of the kills, LGD is able to flip the point at about 45%. And this is where they start to, like, turn the dial of aggression up, because they push Lucky Future back to the spawn. But DM on the Tracer starts to bring the fight back. And Lucky Future flips the point back at 63%. And this is where we see Only Wish start to get a little bit trigger happy over on the Lucio, channeling his inner funny Astro, as he picks up 2 kills for LGD to flip the point back. So at this point, Lucky Future was at 93%. Ursa ends up trying to go for a Deadeye, but he just gets punted away by Guxiu with the Primal Rage. So LGD ends up sending this one to a round 3. So already, we're off to a very close series, which does continue. We move on to Guardians, where both teams opt to run the Sombra Tracer, or Sombracer, whatever you want to call it. That's just what the casters dub it. I don't know how I feel about the name. That's besides the point. But Lucky Future is dropped pretty low off of the aggression of Guxiu and Eileen. The Primal Rage comes out, and LGD are able to take the first control of the point. And the Lucky Future just aren't able to flip the point back. So LGD end up taking game 1. So going on to game 2, we move over to Numbani. And, IDK ends up pocketing Urster, who is on the Genji. So Urster is able to get a very quick Dragon Blade. And the fight basically gets taken off the point, with LGD getting the better of it, and Lucky Future failed to secure anything, despite a pretty solid opening for them overall. Rika Sombra gets dropped early on, and Ursa's Dragon Blade drops only Wish, who was on the Mercy at the time. But Shy basically just gets deleted with dash resets, and that allows Lucky Future to capture point A. And then, we see a little bit of fight coming back. We see Lucky Future get stopped after Yauxi and Shy combine for a 4K. But then Gyuxu comes in, looks to disrupt with the Primal Rage. Lucky Future does manage to get to the second point. And we see Ursa bring out the Soldier 76 at this point, as, we entered that last phase of Numbani. And LGD ends up finding a few picks after investing in EMP. And they cleaned up the rest of Lucky Future to prevent them from completing Numbani. So, looking at LGD's attack, they just bully their way onto the point. They're able to get 2 ticks fairly quickly. And on the next engage, they get the follow through. They capture the first point. So, pretty good time overall to start things off. We see Gyuxu invest a Primal Rage, and he just punts Lucid like all over the map. It was pretty comical. And that was actually during his Transcendence, too. So LGD ends up getting the second point there. And, we see the EMP investment coming out from Erster. Lucky Future wins that fight outright as they secure 4 kills. But it's DM coming in, getting a lot of cleanup, gets 3k, and Erster follows through with an EMP, which allows Lucky Future to get the team kill at that point. And then, again, it's an EMP battle. I mean, Sombras are on both sides, so there's EMPs aplenty on both sides. But, the EMP is invested from Rika, but that is after Lucky Future gets a few kills. So we see a self-destruct pulling things back for LGD. But the EMP comes out from Lucky Future, and Lucky Future end up picking up the win on game 2. So, we enter halftime 1-1, so another close start to this series.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely, like you said, the battle of the EMPs, and there's a lot going on with the EMPs, even in both of these first 2 maps. You mentioned Eileen coming out with a really good translocator into an EMP that they were able to capitalize on. And something I wanted to mention about that is that that Sombra play actually resulted in 2 kills coming from the Sombra right after the EMP. What you see a lot is the EMP coming out and then the rest of the team coming up and cleaning up kills, But it was really fun to see how he just went, oh, I'm gonna turn around and shove my gun in your face right after I take away all your abilities. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have Erster on Numbani, and there was one moment where he was playing Sombra on defense, and he basically stealthed into the middle of their team in the streets phase and EMP'd, and no one was there to help him out afterwards, and he got dropped immediately. And then DM came in on the Tracer for Lucky Future Zenith, and he got dropped too. So that left their team with no DPS to capitalize on this EMP, and kind of ended up being a wasted ult there. But we'll talk more about that later on, I suppose.
All right, so moving on to game 3, we went over to Hanamura, everyone's favorite game mode in Assault, 2CP. And we see a lot of like this duel going on between Lucid and Gyuxu, and Lucid, at least on this map, gets a little bit of redemption. He does get the redemption kill when Gyuxu gets the Primal Rage out, so, kind of paying him back for, Gyuxu, punting him off of the map mid-Transcendent, so that's a definitely feels-good man moment for him. And LGD puts a lot of pressure on the point early on. They do end up securing it with over 6 minutes left on the clock. Erster pulls out the blade, nets no kills, which gives LGD an opportunity to get on the point, and they pressure Lucky Future's front line to gain that first tick, but Lucky Future brings it back after dropping both of LGD's DPS. And I have to say, I'm not a fan of all of these teams having acronyms, especially when I'm talking LGD DPS. Not a fan of that. Same with F Energy FE when they were a thing. But that's besides the point. Getting back to the breakdown, LGD do end up completing the map with about 19 seconds left on the clock. So not the best time, but they did complete the map. We see on the other tech, ultimates being invested from both sides. Lucky Future do turn the tides after killing the LGD support line, and to capture the first point with, about the same amount of time, 6 minutes left on the clock. But they're not able to get the better of the next couple of exchanges and haven't really gained any progress on a point. Gyuxiu does invest his Primal Rage, ends up finding 3 with it, so a very big Winston play from him. And Lucky Future at this point are just running out of time. Eileen invests his Dragon Blade, drops IDK, and LGD hold Lucky Future from gaining anything on point B to take Game 3. Which brings us, feeling dispirited, over on Dorado for Game 4. We see Lucky Future's dive forcing out the Transcendence from Farway. And really it's the dive cleanup that allows them to capture that first point. We didn't see a lot of pressure by LGD in this case, because Lucky Future really had the better positioning in regards to that fight. Rika's EMP comes out, which is behind the payload, and it's Urster that is getting all of the cleanup on the objective. And that's where Lucky Future's progress just does not get slowed down, at all. They do finish the map with over 3 minutes left in the time make, which is absolutely massive on Dorado. Dorado is one of those maps that we might not always see getting completed, so for them to complete it with that much time was definitely a huge deal. We do see Urster bring out the Widowmaker for Lucky Future on their defense, which, we don't always see on first point defense on Dorado, so that was kind of interesting. But Rika pulls out an early Dragon Blade. He's met with the Transcendence, so, that's typical. Usually you try to force out the Transcendence first. It did not happen. But DM brings it back for Lucky Future by picking off both of the supports. And this is where DM just takes control. He begins to frag out going into overtime. Ends up securing 3 kills for LGD. And, they're able to take the first point with that attack. So the clock starts to work against LGD, despite Shy starting to pop off on the Widowmaker, and they're unable to get to the payload for this overtime push, and LGD pick up the win. So, back and forth we go. That's pretty much the story of this series going into the next halftime.
Yeah, no, definitely. Speaking of back and forth, actually, perfect. I wanted to kind of talk about our man Urster over here, because he seems, on Dorado is when I kind of realized that he seems like one of those players that is very highs and lows. On Dorado, he had a couple of really good plays where he was able, like you said, able to clean up from EMPs and get some kills in. But there were several times on Hanamura where I was just going, what is this guy doing, Right at the beginning on defense on point B in Hanamura, he kind of rushes in with a blade without looking and gets nothing out of it. It happens again later on in point B defense. And then on their point A attack also, this is without a blade this time, thank God. But he rushes into that little side room on Hanamura A attack, right to the right-hand side of the gate there. And just rushes in blind and gets completely caught out by Shy. And dropped immediately. So it was kind of a theme of him he has a tendency, it seems, to go in blind and not really check his surroundings and check and see when a good time to pull his blade out might be. But then again, like I said, we go into Dorado and we see him cleaning up some good kills and actually getting work done. So it was really back and forth there. So I didn't really quite know what to make of his play at this point.
All right, well, moving on to Game 5, we went to Ilios, everyone's favorite vacation destination in Overwatch, apparently. And Lucky Future bring out the McCree to try to deal with the Sunbracer coming out of LGD. And Urster shoots Gyuxi out of the sky as he tries to, retreat, because they had already lost that first fight. And Lucky Future do end up securing the first capture. Shy ends up getting staggered pretty bad after he eats a flashbang and, a couple of shots from Erster. We see Eileen invest in EMP, and, Gyuxu secures a few kills, and LGD does manage to flip the point, but that wasn't until Lucky Future gained 87%. So pretty big deficit already. We do see the EMP and self-destruct combo coming out of LGD, which does manage to push the round into overtime, and, Shy ends up sticking so what with the pulse bomb. The point does flip after like a zone in Deadeye for Lucky Future, which was interesting. They basically all just ran away from it and off of the point at that particular moment. And Eileen gets dropped pretty early on, not able to invest the EMP, and we just get like this really scrappy fight with LGD getting the better of the exchange. They end up hooking Erster off the map to take round 1. So in round 2, we saw Yauxi get shot out of the sky as he went for a self-destruct, and it was because of Erster pulling out the Deadeye. So, definitely very vulnerable when you're, Pilot D.Va, since you can't really move anywhere. So there's a lot of free-falling moments there in particular. And that one was a very close round. We saw the point flip back multiple times throughout the second round, but LGD do end up winning more at the team fights, which allow them to secure the win, to take a lead going into Game 6, which was over on Hollywood. So, Lucky Future decide to run the Widowmaker and the Pharah on their attack. Really not something we see a whole lot of. But DM isn't able to find much value with the Widow and decides to opt to run a Tracer. After a couple of failed attempts on the point, LGD are pushed into the cafe, which allows Lucky Future to secure a couple of ticks on the point. Eileen ends up going for, like, a Riptire from downtown. I mean, he was, like, so far away at this point. He does manage to find the kill there, and LGD are able to engage again, just off of that. And Ursa's Dragon Blade basically just cleans up the point, but Lucky Future is able to secure it. So this is where Shy starts to open things up. He ends up sniping both of the Lucky Future support players, but DM comes back, gets a couple of redemption kills, ends up sticking him with a pulse bomb, and Lucky Future just start to struggle quite a bit here in the streets phase, but they do manage to get to that second point, but it wasn't until they were in overtime. But, they kind of get stopped there. They're unable to finish their attack. So, we see DM coming out with a McCree on the defense, along with Erster's Junkrat. So really, not really, typical parents we're seeing on the attacker defense in regards to this particular map. We do see an early Deadeye drop in 2, but LGD manages to gain 2 ticks on a point. Eileen basically forces Lucid through the cafe, draws out the Dragon Blade, and gets a cleanup, which allows LGD to capture point A. And this is where DM starts to get the better of the Widow exchange in the streets phase against Shy. But Shy ends up eventually switching over to a Tracer, and starts to kind of turn the tide here, because Shy does drop 3 on the ground here as they look to complete the point before overtime hits. And they do get to the second point with about a minute and a half left, in order to push it to, that yellow rectangle, since, their opposition did not finish the map. And, knowing the clock is working against LGD, this is where the die from Lucky Future starts to get hyper aggro and just, looks to pressure them more and more. Lucky Future does end up finding both supports after a late swap to Reaper from Eileen, which was basically a last-ditch effort for LGD, and it's the disruption off of So What's Primal Rage that knocks LGD off of the cart. Overtime ends up running out, and that forces a Game 7, so again, a very close series, a lot of back and forth in this one. It hasn't been so much, momentum, switching in the clutch where, one team wins 2 and then the other team pulls it back. No, this is just straight and back and forth in the China scene.
Yeah, definitely. Just going back to Ilios and, well, whatever, talking about both maps in general, but something I wanted to mention was Shy and the appropriateness of his name at times, because there are sometimes where he seems like he's kind of a quiet tracer, you know, just doing his own thing off in the background a little bit. But then there are times like on Ilios that you mentioned where he comes in with really clutch pulse bombs and just other plays. And then on Hollywood, I mean, he had a really good opening on Widow, and then once he kind of fell out of that favor, he switched off to the Tracer, and again had a really good showing on Tracer on the ground. So he's kind of has like he's like one of those friends that's really quiet at first. He's shy, and then you have to get to know him, and then he'll like, I'm just gonna shoot you in the face. It's fine.
Then you can't get them to shut up.
Exactly. Also, I wanted to comment just how in this series we saw a lot more Reaper than and we still didn't see that much, which is so it's funny that I'm saying this, than we are used to seeing in other regions. And I'm curious as to whether you think that's just a regional preference, because I know some regions have different preferences towards not metas, but whatever pick choices, or if it's just a situational thing, because I mean they were often pulled out on those kind of defenses where you're kind of busting up a bunch of clumped up people and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, when it comes to Reaper, it's more so on the defense, on assault maps.
Right.
So it's typically something we see for 2CP, mostly
Right.
on like Temple of Anubis. So it was really kind of off-putting because that's not really something we see on escort maps. So I was very perplexed by it. It's really not something that we see in any region. So I don't know if that was just a comfort pick for him or what the case
Yeah.
was. But like it seemed like anytime they needed to, secure a couple of picks, they would switch to that Reaper and eventually like switch off of it again. But we did see it come up, at least a couple of times on the defense there on Hollywood.
Yeah, we saw Erster pick it up on defense, I think, earlier on Hanamura as well. Kind of the same deal, where he would flex onto it for less than a minute and then flex right back off. So it's interesting to me.
Absolutely. So, that being said, guys, we went into a Game 7, which was played on the map that isn't really a map, depending on who you're talking to, because we went to Junkertown. So, both sides opt to run the Widow Genji, and this is another one of those scenes that is kind of perplexing to me, because traditionally, we see a lot of, like, Widow Tracer. Not so much Genji paired with the Widow. But Urser finds some early picks with the Genji. Lucky Future make quick work of the first point. Shy ends up finding two headshots, but DM answers right back with two of his own, so a lot of back and forth here. And Lucky Future do able to push the cart and reach the objective. And this is where Michelle starts to come alive on the D.Va, gets a D-Mech, secures 3 kills. I mean, we really don't see a ton of, like, cleanup out of D.Vas anymore, so anytime I see a D.Va popping off, like, I'm, like, over the moon. Lucky Future end up getting a team kill, and, Erster ends up drawing the Dragon Blade as they leave to re-engage, and the cleanup at this point is all in Lucky Future's favor as they finish the map with 3 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock. So on a defensive end, Lucky Future end up opting to run the Junkrat, which is, pretty common. Early picks force out the Resurrects on both sides, so a lot of scrappiness early on, but it's Lucky Future getting the better of that exchange. And DM gets pulled in from a Roadhog hook from Yauxi, and he ends up surviving, which is pretty big. And Eileen comes in with the Dragon Blade, secures 3 kills, and this is where LGD starts to gain a lot of ground. And we see, the Supercharger and Whole Hog combo coming out, so, they start to go Whole Hog in this case, and LGD secures the first point off of that. And Lucky Future's defense starts to regain a little bit of momentum, but it wasn't until, like, the payload had reached, like, that bridge area on the high ground. And this is where Shy starts to come alive on the Widowmaker, because he kind of goes for, like, that Widow flank, and LGD are able to reach the second point in overtime. So, Eileen pulls out the blade, cuts through the Lucky Future support line, which brings LGD to the final turn of the map. And Urser pulls out the blade, doesn't find anything, and LGD get the better of the fight to complete the map in overtime. So, we go into Time Bank, like we would mostly expect in Junkertown. But the big thing here is the time bank differential. You have 1 minute compared to 4 minutes and 20 seconds. That is a huge differential. And, LGD end up securing the first point, but it wasn't until overtime. And they get halted due to Urster's Rip Tire. So LGD are, pretty much stopped at, the first turn at that point. And then moving on to the other time bank, 420 is a lot of time. I mean, that's a tough task for anyone. You basically have to ask for a full hold at this point, which more than likely isn't going to happen. We have seen it happen, but it doesn't happen that often. So DM opens things up on the Widowmaker, gets the snipe on Shy, who was also on the Widowmaker, which forces a Resurrect out of Only Wish. DM drops Shy yet again, so... Shy just had no answer for DM on the Widow, and Lucky Future just make quick work of the first point after a Dragon Blade from Urster, and LGD aren't able to recontest, and it was Lucky Future coming out on top on Junkertown and take the Grand Finals 4-3, so all hail Arcane Overloads.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I feel like people probably called it that way just because, Korean team versus Chinese team. But it was a lot closer, I feel like, than a lot of people might have expected.
Right.
Just on that last map, too, I do want to, again, comment. I feel like it's everything that I said about Urster is, showcased in that map because he had some air blades, he had some good blades, he had some weird moments. And then also kind of, again, with Shy on the Widow, he definitely was getting out sniped by DM, but was able to make some good pickoffs on his own. So I mean, even though they did end up getting beat in the series, LGD definitely put up a good fight. I mean, they went to 7 maps and they made a strong showing. So worked out.
All right. Well, it has been a very long episode because we covered a ton of matches, and part of that is due to a couple of game 7s in these series. Sure. So let's go ahead and close things out. I know it's been kind of a long one, especially for me. I mean, we're almost on four hours between the 2 shows tonight. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna close it out here. If you want to show some support, one of the best ways to do that, one of the quickest ways to do that, is to go leave us a positive review over on iTunes. Any sort of feedback or constructive criticism is welcomed, just because that will offer us some insight on how we can make for a better listen experience for you guys. We do have our Overwatch League Pick'em League. You can find a link to that in the show notes. It's not too late to join and be in the run-in for some stage prizes. We do have our podcast directory that is Overwatch Recall. This started a couple weeks back, so if you haven't listened to our other shows, you might not know about it. But basically what it is a listen of all of the Overwatch League, and Overwatch Path to Pro podcasts, and you can find it over on our website at owlnshow.com/OWRecall, and every Sunday, mostly in the evenings or late evenings, I release episodic listens, so you can find a listen of all the new episodes from these different podcasts in the weekly listens there. So be sure to follow Overwatch Recall. That's over on Twitter at OWRecall. And I am going to have a podcast for it, so it's a way for you guys to get to know the Overwatch content creators and all the other podcasts out there. So I'll have some news on that pretty soon. Not Blizzard soon, so I'm not going to put a TM next to it or anything like that, but it'll be happening sooner than most people might think, so keep an eye out in regards to that. We do have some news in regards to another community event, and this one is a tournament. So our first tournament being hosted by Overwatch League Network, and this will be on June 30th. This will start at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll be using a 3v3 lockout elimination rule set. So all of the matches are going to be streamed live over on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/OWLNshow, and it will be Slambo and myself, totally drunk, casting these matches. So we've casted, some of the prior Heroes Never Die and the Cavalry, or Cavalry Never Dies in this case, tournaments. So looking forward to casting some more Overwatch with my soulmate Slambo, and we will be having some giveaways for the tournament entrants, and maybe even for the Twitch viewers. So keep that in mind. So stay tuned for more details on that front. But if you want to find more information on our tournament, you can find it over on our challenge site at challenge.com/OWLN as I will link it in Twitch chat. So, grab a few friends, sign up for the tournament. If you need any help registering your team, please let me know. Reach out and I will help you with the sign up process, because I know it does confuse a few people, and it has in the past, so bear that in mind. But we hope to see you guys there, and we look forward to that. But Ren, why don't you go ahead and let the people know where they can find us over on the interwebs.
If you do need to reach us for help with the challenge registration or anything that you might want to talk to us about regarding the show, you can contact us at our new email address,
this is awesome.
contact@owlnshow.com. We are also live streaming on Twitch right now at twitch.tv/OWLNshow. We did hit Twitch affiliate, so you can support the show by subscribing to our channel and unlocking our network emoticon. Thank you again to everyone who watches the shows live. It's great having you guys out here with us. If you want to catch us, we're on 3 nights a week. We have Overwatch League Network on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific, Heroes Never Die on Wednesdays at 5, and the Bat Cap on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Pacific.
Barring your schedule.
Sorry?
Barring your schedule.
Yes. Sorry about that again.
That's
Thank you all for being so accommodating. Love. Much love. Anywho, host streams will also be held on Friday and Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. You can also find us on YouTube. If you just search for Overwatch League Network, we are getting close to that custom URL. So you can always help us out by subscribing to that channel, and we would really appreciate that. All of our podcast episodes, top plays, and other videos can be found over there. But Totem, why don't you let them know where they can find you?
Well, you can find me over on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR. I do have a Twitch, guys, but as you know by now, I mostly stream over on our podcast channel. So if I am live, which is, 3 podcasts a week, and Saturday streams, which are the host block that I do, I'll be live on this channel there. And, yeah. I mean, whether it is a community event or just a normal stream that I would host, I will be here Saturday nights moving forward. But Ren, where can people get a hold of you over on the social media?
You can find me on Twitter at PrimalRen. That's Ren with 2 N's. I also have a Twitch channel that I use even more rarely now. It's over at twitch.tv/PrimalRen. I don't stream there a whole bunch, especially because I've been traveling so much lately, but if you want, go ahead and check it out anyways. Maybe you'll look at the blank screen. Should be fun.
All right, well, with that said, guys, we're going to go ahead and close out the show as we are almost nearing 2 hours. Oh, man, it's been a long night. So, obviously, since we've recorded 2 shows today, expect... Well, if you're listening to the audio version, you might notice this episode is going to be released a day earlier than what it would normally be. Or it's still based on the old schedule. Maybe we'll get back to our new schedule next week. But we hope to see you guys back for our host streams on Friday and Saturday nights. And, spend some time in the anniversary event. Let us know what you think of the competitive FFA DM, because I know I've been kind of tilted at some points playing that. But at least you won't have to blame teammates. You can just blame BS abilities that are crutch abilities like McCree's Flashbane and things like that. But for now, guys, we will see you back on Monday for Overwatch League Network. Guys, have a good night. Thank you for listening to Overwatch League Network, the Backcap. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at OWLN Show. Engage with the community on Discord at discord.me/OWLN Show. And join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night over on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN Show.